85% of the people say, yes, there should be voter ID. You should be able to show your ID at the poll, either to register to vote or to be able to vote. Something should match. And people want integrity in elections. And they also want people who are not American citizens not to vote. The whole issue of voter ID is also sort of being used as a political tool to get people nervous about the integrity of our elections and to sort of put mistrust into our elections, like as a strategy.
Why don't Democrats want voter ID? Why don't they want this? It's
perfect example why 80-20 issues don't get passed. Yeah. Because the party that's on the side of the 80% always then goes, oh, look at this, we got this issue. And then they try to shove in a bunch of stuff that's like not even related.
There's zero money in the federal bill for implementation at all. And there's also criminal prosecution and criminal penalties for election officials who don't do it properly.
All right, Bill, welcome back to the Independent Voter Podcast. Man, a bunch of you at home and people on Twitter and everything else keep asking me about the California race and what this means for open primaries and all that stuff. And we'll get to that maybe on this episode, but there's a lot more to come on that. But this episode, we're going to cover some things with Sean and Kara and Ethan that maybe aren't in the typical like reform box, but they're related, right? I know Kara just did a really long and I think good article on the wealth tax, which can be really misunderstood. We obviously know it's a really easy campaign to say, oh, let's tax the billionaires, right? But at the end of the day, you got to understand the consequences of it. John's been covering some interesting activity going on in the reform space, including some new developments out of Oklahoma. And then, Ethan still actually working on the redevelopment of the independent voters side.
Yeah, I mean, every single article now is going to go through, something I've worked on. So I feel good about that.
Taking credit for everything there. Why don't we jump right into it, Kara? You got this wealth tax stuff going. Why are you working on something that could potentially do billionaires need help explaining to people the consequences of something?
I guess the first thing I want to say is that if there's any billionaires listening to the Independent Voter Podcast, instead of putting your money into fighting wealth taxes, you should put your money into helping reforms pass so that we can break up the two-party duopoly and restore some fairness.
I just say put your money in voter education, right?
Yes.
So that you can't have, so the more you put into education, the less simple, sound good, feel good talking points that have really disastrous consequences can be effective, right?
I think so. I mean, the proposed wealth tax in California on billionaires is definitely become one of the most consequential debates in the nation, because what happens when you tax the billionaires? You get a certain amount of money, but do then the billionaires leave the state? And, in California, this would really be a problem because it would erode the tax base and it could completely reshape California's economy. And, for me, in doing research on the wealth tax, one of the things that I found particularly interesting is that, what is a wealth tax, really? And in California, what it's going to be is they're going to tax the amount of assets that you currently have, not your income coming in. So I earn a certain amount of money and then I pay income taxes. This is a one-time tax on all of your wealth. So this is basically if you own any stocks and bonds, if you own any real estate, if you own any, private equity in particular companies. If your net worth is over $1 billion in California and this passes, retroactively California is going to tax you. So
I have a question about that because I'm not an expert on this stuff. I mean, I think Kara, you qualify as an expert now because you did quite a bit of research. But a question, how does valuation occur in that regard? What if I have Chad's awesome investment trust or whatever the heck it is, right? And it's invested in this and that. It's got minority positions and stuff that's private investments. How do they value that? What's even the process?
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole crazy part about this, or one of them is basically assets would be taxed whether or not the asset had been sold or if it had been converted to cash, or depending on what time it is in the market. And, So just the
Even
valuation is going to be crazy.
Yeah, even if it's a controlling stake in a business that you founded, like those are still shares that give you, voting power in the company. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs, like the Google people, if they have to sell off a large portion of their shares in Google, they would lose their controlling interest in that corporation, which obviously, that's a big deal.
I mean,
I know,
yeah,
maybe-
there's a difference between liquidity wealth, which is like the cash you have on hand, and net worth, which is everything added to that. So
There's also a difference in taxing money that's coming into you in any given year and taxing money that you earned in the past that you had no expectation would be taxed further. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
yeah,
it's like
Yeah.
a whole new rule. And
No.
then a lot of people they just packed up and moved.
yeah, and I'm not, again, like Chad said, I'm not an expert on this topic either. Although what struck me as interesting was listening to San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan and gubernatorial candidate talk about. Well, okay, so I don't think he was specifically talking about the wealth tax, but he was talking about the California budget, which has increased annually by $150 billion. That's billion with a B.
Mhm.
And when you think about all that money, Californians can rightfully ask, okay, how's that being spent? Where is that going? And then when you add into that calculus another tax that could bring in even more revenue, it does kind of feed into this question, okay, is California actually meeting its goals in terms of its issues? Is that where the money's going? Because all these problems that you look like in California, whether it's homelessness, whether it's housing affordability, or whether it's a drug crime crisis, what programs has the state put in place? What money is going into those programs, and are those programs being effective? So when you think about an increase in budget that substantial and then add to it additional taxes, you have to ask, does California actually need more taxes like
Well, I
this?
mean, so the measure as it's proposed, is designed to help fix some of the holes in California's budget. So 90% of it will go into something called a billionaire tax health account to protect or enhance Medi-Cal. That's California's Medicaid program. That's healthcare for the less fortunate. And then 10% will go into the billionaire tax education and food assistance account. So that would fund K through 12 education, 2 years of community college, and then programs like all kinds of food programs, CalFresh, CalFood, and California's Universal Meals Program. So that's where the money would go. It'd flow right into California's. It wouldn't flow right into California's general fund. It would go like specifically to these two
And-
areas.
So if you step back though, take what probably is a 90-10 issue, right? It's like, oh, boo-hoo, these billionaires, right? And it's like, there's no doubt wealth inequality has expanded, cost of living's gone up, and it's like, oh, where do you get the money? But the question then becomes, right, is this the right way to do it? Like, does this make sense? And that this is a one-time, right, this is a one-time tax.
Mm-hmm.
And what are the consequences of it, right?
Yeah,
It's like
I mean-
it fills gaps, and what's the consequence? I mean, Kara, I know I saw some of the stuff in your article about this isn't novel. They've done it in other places, and what's been the effect? Okay, did it solve the problems there?
Unfortunately, it hasn't solved the problems there. There's been wealth taxes all around the world. Wealth taxes are definitely not new. There's a lot of European countries who've adopted them during the 20th century. Everybody, though, has repealed them, or at least 9 European countries have repealed wealth taxes since the 1990s, because what happened was there was capital flight. So it turns out that billionaires actually contribute a huge portion of the budgets, which pay for schools and firehouses and police and our roads and our bridges. Their money is taxed in income taxes and already makes up a huge percentage of the amount of the budget. So if you put a wealth tax on somebody in France, they leave France and go to another tax-friendlier country, and then that money leaves with that person. And the same thing could potentially happen in California. I don't know. I mean, I think there's about 200 to 250 billionaires in California. And this particular wealth tax, they say, could generate around $100 billion in one-time revenue.
Which is, it might sound like a lot, but a one-time $100 billion on the state of California, it's not like
Yeah.
that's gonna
Right.
change the
And
universe.
like you said, you know, a 1-year budget increase, like Sean was talking about, is already 150 billion. So that doesn't even cover the amount that they add to the budget in 1 year. I think, to me, like the problem here isn't necessarily the idea of taxing billionaires more. It's the methodology that they're using just doesn't make that much sense to me. Like, the incentive for a billionaire, okay, we're about to go do a one-time wealth tax on all of your assets combined. Like you're saying, why would you not just, it's easy enough just for them to just pack up established residency in another state. Like,
Well,
I think it's like, this way is not the way to do it.
yeah,
in my
I'm
opinion.
thinking like if I'm a billionaire, oh, wouldn't that be nice, right? But I'm gonna go, okay, but this is just what they're doing this year, right?
Right.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
look at a lot of the, how much money has the state of California lost because, like him or not, Elon Musk left, the wealthiest man in the world left California for Texas because he was frustrated with the California government, right? It's like, well, what's that straw that breaks the next billionaire's back?
It might have already broken though, Chad, too, because basically the deadline for the assets being in California was December 31st, 2025. So anybody, even if it doesn't pass, the prospect of it passing already caused people to leave.
Interesting.
The other thing that I think is really interesting is that the money that they're talking about taxing doesn't even actually exist. They're talking about taxing something called an unrealized gain. And this normally does not happen at all. Capital gains are generally taxed only when the assets are sold. But under this proposal, the assets would be taxed regardless of the liquidity of those assets. So you're basically trying to you're trying to do something that's really hard to do. And that's why people like Gavin Newsom and Matt Mahan are against it, and
Well, and a large part of I mean, when there's a large sell-off in a company, there's a lot of shares to be sold. Like, there's got to be people there to buy those shares. Generally, when you see a large sell-off by the founder of the company, that actually brings the overall valuation down, which is interesting because then we're telling people, okay, you have to liquidate a large portion of your shares. Now the actual stock price of the company. So your net worth is not only going down based off what you had to pay the state, it's going down because now what you have left is worth less.
Right.
So
Well, we haven't even gotten into private companies and stuff
Yeah,
and how it
yeah.
affects that. But anyway, for those of you listening at home, like, first, subscribe to the podcast. Go to IVN and check out Kara. I think broke it down really nicely. And check out on social media. We'll be talking about this. You might see some stuff popping up in your feed. But the next issue, which is equally as complex, is one I think is a very interesting dynamic, right? Because that wealth tax happened in California. Maybe later we'll talk about, the Bernie and Ro Khanna who are leading the effort to try to do something similar on a national level. But we have this issue of voter ID. Now, this is an issue where it's like at 85%, folks want some form of voter ID.
Yeah.
Now, why don't we have it? A large part is people don't trust the other party, right? Especially Democrats don't trust Republicans to implement.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kara has gone to do another deep dive. I don't know. She's just reading and researching all day long. But it's like this interesting dynamic where you have on the federal level a voter ID, and then California has a voter ID initiative. And on the surface, it's like, well, they must be the same thing. But
like all
they're
voter
not,
ID is all
right?
voter ID, right? It's not.
Right. So what? Yeah. So tell us what's the difference between that.
And we know there's a large difference between the SAVE Act, which is the federal bill being proposed, and the California Voter ID Act. So tell us.
Yeah. I mean,
they're completely different. So, and they're definitely going to get painted as the same broad brush. And I don't know if I should give you my opinion on it, or if I should just tell you what each of them.
Disclose it.
Start with the facts. Start with the facts, and then we'll go into it.
We're allowed to have opinions.
I was really curious about it because, you ask somebody, should there be voter ID? And what is it? 85% of the people say, yes, there should be voter ID. You should be able to show your ID at the poll, either to register to vote or to be able to vote. Something should match, and that, people want integrity in elections. And they also, want people who are not American citizens not to vote. The whole issue of voter ID is also sort of being used as a political tool to get people nervous about the integrity of our elections and to sort of put mistrust into our elections,
but
like
so
as a
like
strategy.
go at it. What's the difference between Washington and California? Like what, right?
So the federal one is called it's called the Federal Save Act. It's HR 7296, and it is a totally sweeping and, in my opinion, incredibly problematic bill full of these mandates that's going to require documentary proof of citizenship required to register. So a state may not register an individual to vote in elections held into the United States unless the person at the time the individual applies to register to vote, the individual provides documentary proof of United States citizenship. So that would be either a real ID, compliant document, a valid passport, a military ID, combined with you have to bring your record of service with you that shows your place of birth if you want to bring that. Or if you bring your birth certificate, and your name has changed, then you would also have to bring your marriage certificate. So you'd have to gather all of these things together to go down to register to vote. So if, say, you moved from Maine to California, this bill passes, and then all of a sudden, if I want to re-register in California, I've got to go to California. And instead of just attesting to the fact that I am a U.S. citizen and signing my name and swearing under perjury that I'm a citizen, I'm going to have to bring my birth certificate, my marriage certificate, my passport, or a real ID, which I actually don't have my real ID yet. I need to get that. But anyway, that's going to keep a lot of people from voting.
People
and then
say, what's the big deal?
Well, the big deal is that it's too much. What do you mean? What's the big deal?
That's my question. I mean, that's what folks supporting the bill are going to say. What's the big deal? You got to. I got to show my ID if I want to.
It's not just showing your ID.
Booze.
Imagine if you had to show your birth certificate and your marriage certificate to buy alcohol. Imagine if you or bring a passport. But
you can't. I just show. You said one of the methods is a real ID.
Real ID. So most people don't even have their real IDs.
So go get it.
I think one of the more compelling arguments against this is: does this constitute a poll tax? When you think about it, because for a lot of Americans who don't have a passport, that's going to cost them money, or even a real ID, that's going to cost them money to get. It's going to cost them money to be able to get access to a birth certificate that they may not have handed on them. So it ultimately the U.S. Constitution already says that you cannot add or tack on a fee to the right to vote. So does this constitute a poll tax?
Why can't states provide free real IDs?
Well, in California, they're absolutely going to do that, and that is in the bill, which is one of the big differences between California's voter ID initiative.
But that's not. You're telling me that's not in the federal bill?
No.
Why?
Because the
states control the
actually,
IDs.
Chad, there's zero money in the federal bill for implementation at all. And there's also criminal prosecution and criminal penalties for election officials who don't do it properly. So, it's...
Well, not to mention, if you said, okay, let's just get a passport. I'm pretty sure there's like a multiple months wait to get a passport. Like you can't just get a passport immediately.
You could get it expedited, but it's going to cost you even more money.
Exactly. It costs more to get it expedited. And the real ID process, you're telling people, okay, now you have to take an entire extra, however long out of your day, however you got a scheduled time, go to the DMV, bring all the same extra documents that you would need to, that you would have to bring with you to the ballot box, birth certificate, all that stuff. Half the time, I recently got my real ID. We had to go back to our house to get back a few other documents. And I think the thing is we are listening to this. We're talking about this from the perspective of people who frequently engage with the news, engage with politics. We're talking about it right now. Imagine, once the midterms come up, you go to the ballot box, you're like, oh, I didn't know they passed this voter ID law. I don't have all this stuff. I didn't get a real ID. I didn't get a passport. And now, well, what's the option? You either don't vote or you try and expedite your real ID, all this stuff before the ballot closes. It's just not realistic. So I think we should scale it back from our perspective versus the average voter. What is this actually going to do to the electorate? And probably, like all those statistics work, it's the most disadvantaged people that end up getting screwed by this type of thing.
And there's a lot of states that already require a photo ID, that you need to show a photo ID when you go to vote.
Yeah,
there's
but not
even
a
more states that
right? You could just show your driver's license.
Right. And I think what's interesting though is that you'll hear even some Republicans, who support the SAVE Act say, the government should subsidize the cost of IDs if they do that. That's what they do in Wisconsin. If you need it, if you need the government to do it, they'll provide you a free ID. And even in Wisconsin, they go further. If you don't have all the documentation you need to get that free ID, they'll give what's called a DMV receipt, which is temporary, a one-time thing. It's kind of like having a driver's permit, right? And so that will allow you to vote in that one election if you have that DMV receipt, and they can use their own methods of validating your residency and eligibility to vote. But I mean, these are options that are on the table. And I think the problem with the federal bill, as opposed to, say, the California initiative, is the federal bill just puts all these restrictions in place. It limits the possibilities of what could be a voter ID, as opposed to allowing people all the opportunities to vote under this type of system.
It also takes effect immediately. So there's no phase in. It takes effect immediately, and because it takes effect immediately, that's notable for what the impact that it could have on the midterm elections that are happening right now.
Coupled with those criminal prosecutions, I mean, let's say there's a incorrect implementation in whatever area, you could easily, whoever is the powers that be could go back and be like, well, they didn't implement this very specific part of the, of the SAVE Act here, invalidate the entire election, invalidate parts of it, open investigations. It just feels like the type of bill that's written in such a way, with so many extra provisions added in. I know they added some provisions around transgender laws and stuff like that, like to the point where they know one side, the Democrats, are going to oppose this. So it's the perfect thing where they can come back and be like, well, why don't Democrats want voter ID? Why don't they want this? It's clear if they they would just pass it if there wasn't anything going wrong. It's just another design
Which is a perfect example of why 80-20 issues don't get passed. Yeah. Because the party that's on the side of the 80% always then goes, oh, look at this, we got this issue, and then they try to shove in a bunch of stuff that's like not even related.
That's exactly what there's literally a clip of the president saying, this is 86%, and even a lot of Democrats like it. So let's add these things that he said.
Yeah, so let's see how close we can get to 50% and get a bunch of stuff.
And apparently they've added things like mail-in voting. Mail-in voting is very popular with voters. They've added all these things. Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary for the White House, had listed all like the 5 main things that the new SAVE Act will do, among them being these transgendered issues. And we've talked about this on this podcast before with these 80-20 issues. If you want to pass them, have them exist on their own. Just have a standalone voter ID bill. And I promise you that for the Republicans, that puts pressure on the Democrats. Say, hey, a lot of your voters support this. All right. But adding on this extra stuff is just.
Going back to California, though, right? Like, that's what they did. They did.
For California, in-person voting, if this initiative passes, you just bring your driver's license. You just bring any government-issued ID. It doesn't have to be a real ID. It doesn't have to be a passport. You don't have to bring your birth certificate or your marriage certificate. For the mail-in requirement, which, so many people vote by mail in California, you just have to put the last 4 digits of your social.
Everybody gets a ballot in California by mail. So that's my question. Like, that's a tough thing. So how do they deal with this in California?
The way that they're going to deal with it, how do they deal with it now? They check it.
No, within this bill.
The bill basically has a pretty limited requirement. You basically have to just write the last 4 digits of some unique identifying number that's associated with you, like the last 4 of your social. And then the government will have that, and they'll just be able to triple check, right? The type of ID, and then also you'll be able to figure out what that is. So if it's the last 4 digits of your social, you'll be able to call up a phone number and say, what is my ID? And they'll say it's the last 4 digits of your social. And then you write those on your ballot and send it in. And also, by the way, the California one, also California will provide you with an ID if you don't have one.
I think, whatever side of the political aisle you're on, and if you live in California, let's not allow, the people to come in and question the validity of California's elections. Like I think, whatever side of that seems like a reasonable bill that has actually been written to, accomplish the objective that we're looking for.
The political reality is the folks that do oppose it, that are supporting the 20%, they're not going to make it about, oh, wow, well, this one's really reasonable, but here's why we don't. They're just going to say, look, this is a Trump Republican ploy to bring Jim Crow 2.0. And like, how many people are actually going to go and take the time to go, well, no, this is much different than what they're doing on the federal level, one. And even if right, like,
That's
this
what
is
we're for. That's what we're for.
To me, I think that there's not a problem. They've done investigations. There's not people are not who are not citizens are not voting in American elections. My God, they're still, Trump still doesn't think that he lost the 2020 election. He's still, just the other day, seizing ballots in Georgia, right?
But even if you're right about
Arizona,
that, even if you
they
are
just subpoenaed,
even if you are that, they're Georgia, and they just pulled a bunch of ballots from Maricopa County where they're suggesting this stuff. And really, look, I'm always playing devil's advocate here. You guys say, like, there's no chain of custody, so you can't really say that decisively. Especially think about now without any voter ID requirement in California. I mean, once you send the ballot in and then you take the ballot out of the envelope, there's no way. Nobody can prove it either way, Kara, in California, that there are or there aren't, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't, right? You can't prove that somebody didn't just go to a college where there's 17 people registered to the same apartment and took 5 ballots, filled those out, sent them in, and then once the ballot got out of the envelope and there's no chain of custody of the envelope, you're like,
okay, but how many couldn't people from both sides could do that?
Of course.
So statistically, if we look at, okay, let's say 100 people did that with 10 ballots each time, right? That's 1,000 votes on each side, maybe.
Yeah, but then you're going to get, look, and I'm not saying
people
this
also
is
committing
happening.
these crimes. It would be
these are felonies.
These are crimes.
Yeah, stealing mail.
Stealing mail. You go to jail.
No. Think about saying, look, I'm playing devil's advocate. Okay, there's a reason ballot harvesting is illegal in most places, most countries, most states.
Yes,
it's not illegal in California. Right. So if you think about it, say, look, who is the dominant political force in California? There's no question about it. It's labor. Okay, I'm not anti-labor. I think there's an important and extremely important role for labor.
Of course.
But if you go and you say, hey, folks, labor leaders, volunteers, all this stuff, your job is to go and collect those ballots from people we think are supporting labor-endorsed candidates, right? They're going to tell me that every person down that totem pole, how do you know?
You're saying it's institutionally.
You see, you can see there's incentives there's incentives to go and collect more ballots and do that stuff. And who's to say, how do we check that every single person?
And I mean,
I'm
even
not saying it affected one election. I'm not saying it did, but I think that makes the case. Right. Well, you don't know that.
Well, I mean, with all the investigations that have gone, it's true. I don't know that.
So and the thing is, like, so the White House has pointed to a bipartisan commission back from the early 2000s that found that the potential for fraud is greater with mail-in voting. And that is true. There is the potential for it, right? But there's potential for fraud in any voting system. That's just the way it is. Now it comes down to where the evidence is. And has there been evidence that this type of fraud or non-citizen voting or anything like that has A, happened, and B, happened to such a degree that has affected election? And the answer to that question is no. There is yet to be any evidence that this has happened. Now,
because you can't prove it, but
it's further, and that idea is further supported by the fact, if there was evidence, why wouldn't they be pointing to it? Why wouldn't they say, okay, we know for sure, because, they've been talking about this for 6 years now? So
they have, and so look at there, our devil's advocate again. It never gets past summary judgment. They go and they say we have documented evidence. We brought it to court, and then the court kicks it out on standing, right? Because there's you can't.
Well, how many different jurisdictions has this happened in?
A lot.
So doesn't that therefore couldn't we say, okay, if multiple different theoretically unbiased judges have thrown out the same piece
because
of evidence.
They're throwing it out on standing. They're not throwing out, they've never even gotten to the evidence, right? Mm-hmm. They're saying there's not standing to come and do this. And the last thing judges want to do is get involved in looking at elections retrospectively, right? That's not really the place for the courtroom, which my argument is going, whether you sit on the side of, there probably was or probably wasn't or this, right? that's the whole point of why we're having the voter ID. I think to you, the point you made sooner is like, okay, California can remedy, put this issue to rest because I don't know, you don't know. Like, because of the chain of custody issues broadening, I wasn't saying that to say that must mean there is a problem. That must mean there are these manufacturers. I'm saying it opens the door for people to make accusations that can't be proven right or wrong. And so then they go on in perpetuity. Isn't the way to put that stuff to rest.
Well, and
maybe that's the smartest thing to do, but don't do it like in Kentucky, I think you have to show your driver's license in order to get a ballot, to vote. Like on the day of, you show them your driver's license or your a government issued ID, and you go and vote. So in the case of Kentucky, should you really make all of those people then go back and prove that, bring their passport, bring their birth certificate, this is not just about showing a government issued ID. What they're trying to do is and so are you really going to say that someone who's been registered to vote and voting in the state of Kentucky and showing their driver's license every single time is now going to have to, because she changed her name and her name is different on her birth certificate, that she's going to have to go order her marriage? It goes too far, Chad. It's like it goes too far even for the devil, right? It's
the federal act you're talking about.
I'm talking about the federal one, and I'm talking about how that it goes too far and that there's no phase in for it, and that it's designed not to try to stop something that's really probably not happening.
And I think another variable, though, to consider is that in a increasing hyperpartisan environment, the other side is always going to accuse the opposing party of cheating.
Well, it feels like it's a tactic, right? It feels like
we've seen an increase of this. We've seen it from both sides trying to deny the results of an election, right? We see it more so.
Don't forget Russia. Remember?
Yeah. So I mean, it's. Well, okay, so with that, it wasn't the question of whether or not Russia was trying to interfere in our elections. It's the connection that Trump had with Russia, which was found that there wasn't that connection that the Democrats were proposing that there was. But but that's my point, right? So in order to impact the outcome of election, both sides will now accuse the other of cheating.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that's the whole point. Why Kara wrote this article, right?
Yeah.
Is to say Washington's gone and they've made it a political issue and they've done political overreach, which is what those partisans do, right? That's what the Republicans are doing with their majority in Washington. And we're saying there's a ray of hope in California. Forget who the author was. Just go and look at it objectively. It's a well thought out bill. It's a practical solution, right? Maybe it's going to be used for political purposes like everything else in campaigns.
But it gets used by both sides for political purposes.
Right,
so in California, those very same people who are against this will say that people who are for it are racist, vote suppressing, people who Jim Crow 2.0, right? That's what they're going to say about it.
That's
So
exactly
like
what
everybody gets to use the issue. Everybody, and meanwhile, the public isn't any more safe, informed, more likely to want to participate. Do you really want to participate in this? Like, this just makes people recoil, and they're just going to go back to, they're not going to vote. And I don't understand why it's not better if everyone just who can vote, who is an American citizen, does vote. I don't understand this. I
think that's what we're all trying to get to, right? And that's what we're saying California, well, maybe not everybody's trying to get there, but the majority, the 80% of us are trying to get to, right?
I sure hope so.
Next,
we got anything else?
We have Kevin Kiley.
Kevin Kiley's gone independent, right?
Former Republican.
I mean, my first question is he going independent just because the Republican numbers are so bad and it's just for electioneering, or because he truly believes it, right?
I mean, it's got to be that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't talked to him personally, but
admittedly, he is he's a pretty nonpartisan guy. And for all this complaint about, California this, California that, there's a different, California Republicans fundamentally have different incentives than the rest of the country because of the nonpartisan primary, right? They can't be primaried by some, I guess technically they could, but it would be almost impossible to be primaried from the far right in California, which is why you have more moderate Republicans like Kevin Kiley. So, maybe in his defense, hey, why did it take you so long? Why did it take an election with the numbers in your face to do it? But maybe, I don't
I
know.
mean, it's true that we've seen in districts that heavily lean towards one party, a high profile candidate in the opposing party will go independent because they think that might help their help their chances in that election. I'd be curious, and Kevin Kiley, his district was recently redrawn during Prop 50 to lean Democrat. So as a Republican, he's maybe DOA before, even the primaries. But, with that independent label under a nonpartisan primary system, now he gets to highlight his independent credentials. He's not pressured by his party to toe a party line. If he wants to, he can branch out a little bit, broaden his appeal, and show off the independent credentials that he now has under his label, which I think, if I'm Kylie, one of the things I'm running on is my, how I advocated all this time for independent redistricting, right?
Yeah,
All this gerrymandering war. He proposed a bill.
A national bill, which would say, look, nobody does it, right? Which is basically what most voters want, right? Of course, it wasn't going to go anywhere because both parties don't actually want to solve the issue, right?
It's also really interesting, just like when you look at the current makeup of Congress, the fact that Representative Kiley has decided to not be a Republican anymore and to be an independent because, he's still caucusing, I guess, with the Republicans, but their margin of being able to pass a bill like the SAVE Act is so small. I wonder if he'll just, end up ever caucusing, ever becoming like a swing vote. I think he could be a swing vote.
I mean, ultimately, the pressure in Congress, and I think this may even be part of the rules, is that you have to caucus with either Republicans or Democrats. I don't expect Kiley to change his votes on a lot of things, so I expect him to side with Republicans a lot. But you never know.
I don't know. I kind of look like he's going to be like another Murkowski or an Angus King, right? Yeah, Angus King caucuses with the Democrats, but don't take his vote for granted, right? He's same with Murkowski. Like, she caucuses with the Republicans, but don't take her for granted.
So now, how are those two? What kind of election system were both of those office holders elected in, right?
Exactly. That's what people need to understand. Angus King is in office because, is in Maine. He's an independent. They got ranked choice voting in Maine, right? And Murkowski, they have nonpartisan primaries now with ranked choice voting in the general, which is like Murkowski wouldn't be the Democratic Party's choice, but she's also not Donald Trump's choice, right? Which is why he hates ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Right. Which at the same time, the Democrats hate ranked choice voting in places like California, where they don't get to determine the outcome, right? And so at the end of the day, these reforms, they're voter centric. I mean, I had a couple of people, really political people that I respect, all reaching out to me going, now that these candidates, maybe you'll finally get an independent elected. And I represent the Independent Voter Project, voters with a V. And that's all I care about. I'm not anti-Republican. I'm anti-Democrat. I'm not like
you're not necessarily
I
pro-independent candidate.
Right. It's like
election,
probably independent candidates are more likely to support reform, but like I see everything through the eyes of voters and not candidates, right? And so,
same.
I don't know. It's
same. And so what is going on with ranked choice voting? Just a little snippet that we wrote about this week. There's two legislators in the state of Wisconsin that have proposed it, both of them Democrats. I don't know if it has a shot, but good job, Wisconsin, for putting it on the docket there. And they don't have citizen initiatives in Wisconsin. So the only road to reform there for electoral reform is through the legislature, and it's nice to see these guys doing it.
I think Wisconsin may be more of a state to watch in the coming months and a while with this, with their governor calling on for a constitutional amendment to ban partisan gerrymandering, with these lawmakers that are proposing ranked choice voting in a Midwest environment that is largely banning ranked choice voting. We had that in Indiana and Ohio recently. Yeah, ban ranked choice voting. So Wisconsin would stand out there in that part of the country, or this part of the country as well, in doing that. So I find what's happening in that state, and with the whole voter ID thing, how lenient they are with the voter ID stuff. It's an interesting state to watch.
Wisconsin too. Catherine Gale and has, she's a Wisconsinite, and she's done a ton of work in Wisconsin on Final Five voting and
I
trying
was
to
just
move
going to
that
ask that
forward.
question. Does she have anything to do with moving that forward? And
I don't think so, but because Catherine is for open primaries plus ranked choice voting, and this particular bill is ranked choice is more like the main style, and so Catherine thinks that you have to have both is the most effective
well, I happen to
reform.
think that Catherine is
I think Wisconsin already has
smart
open.
and forward thinking.
Yes, she is.
Thinking about unintended consequences and all that stuff.
Yes, she
as well.
is.
So
Yes, she
Yeah.
is. She's brilliant, and she's right that if we do both of these reforms together, that it's better than just one of them without the other.
if I can juxtapose this, right? It's like Republican states, and Trump's been most nationally whooping up people against ranked choice voting. But in DC, where it passed overwhelmingly in a or just Democratic dominant sphere, you have the business community in DC funding an education campaign to explain to people basically the benefits and how to do ranked choice voting, which is, I don't know. I don't have anything in commentary other than throwing that out there. That it's just so interesting that these reforms create, depending on where you're at. Like,
yeah, we talk about the incentive to remove sort of these, either you could call bad faith arguments or just these arguments that hold no water at the end of the day. So like the opposition to ranked choice voting's common argument of it being confusing and complex, when you look at a lot of exit polls for jurisdictions that use ranked choice voting, and it shows that most voters understand it. They find it, simple, fair, and easy. But it does highlight the importance of voter education campaigns to make sure that the most voters are educated on this type of voting system, so you can lessen these arguments that, by people who oppose ranked choice voting, that voters are essentially arguing that voters are too dumb to understand what it is. So that's
always good to see DC making progress. What's
Yeah,
going on in
DC.
Oklahoma
What's
though?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, while we are seeing progress in DC, in Oklahoma, the ballot measure 836, state question 836, to put a all-candidate, all-voter, nonpartisan open primary on the ballot in November, failed to get all the signatures it needed to be certified for the ballot. They submitted 209,000, close to 210, and they needed, I think, 173,000, something like that, to qualify. And the Secretary of State informed them that they had too many signatures be disqualified. The total was 67,000 of their signatures were disqualified, which is a lot.
But I saw some from Andy Moore, who's also the executive director of the National Association of Reformers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying, though, that in a couple of years ago, like 50,000 of these signatures would have qualified, but now they don't because of a new law in the legislature. I don't know. Do you know? I honestly don't know the details, but
so 57,000 of those signatures were disqualified because they failed to match the new requirements that were put in place in 2024, that petitions had to match 4 of 5 data points in the registered voter file. This is first name, last name, zip code, home address number, and date of birth. So you have to fill in all those fields, plus sign it, have someone witness you sign and all that, in order for your petition signature to be verified. And 57,000 signatures failed to meet 4 of the 5 match points. And so those who argued for this change when it happened in 2024 said, this is going to cut down on the challenges, the signatures. It's going to make the process a little bit more secure and be able to stave off of voter fraud. While critics said, well, when you add more fields, that just adds to the potential of these petitions being disqualified. And so while it's still early to see what the lasting impact of this will be, there is an indication that it did have an impact in this particular case, considering that 57,000 signatures were disqualified because of this rule.
Well, it sounds to me, I mean, if it's got zip code and home address in there and you move, I mean, that's already 2 out of the 5, right?
Right.
Well, I mean,
Now you're
those
not
are all the
allowed to do
things
that.
we
You're not.
we talk about unintended consequences. Everybody's think, oh, well, okay, if they don't have their name match, blah, blah, blah. Well, look, me, for example, I go by Chad. My first name's Steven. Like, a lot of times I don't know when they ask, I go to the doctor, like, what's your name? I don't know if they're asking for my middle name because I put that as, the name I prefer, or they're asking me for my real first name. Like, those are things that people don't think about, or it's an illegible 0 that was supposed to be an 8 or something like that. And then they say, well, that's not good enough. Anyway.
Well, like your signature may look a little different than what it normally does, because how many people, except for Donald Trump, signed their names perfectly every time, right?
Yeah.
And so and I think, but with Oklahoma, I think, the requirement, I think, you could argue that's pretty standard what they ask you for these petitions. You can make the argument for that. But one of the most egregious bills, and when reformers try to take this on again in future elections, a more egregious bill is SB 1027, which passed last year, which places a cap on the percent of voters that you could have sign in each county, which is 11% cap in every county. And it's based on voter turnout in the last gubernatorial election. And if you've looked into the numbers, Oklahoma has the worst voter turnouts in the country, and this is even broadly reported in state and nationally. And so, a Oklahoma Institute did a study on this last year. And
how do you know this stuff? Like, what do you do at night, John?
That's all I do is I focus on this, right? And just encyclopedia knowledge.
Sean ends up being in a lot of the clips because he just explains.
I know.
Very well.
I don't know.
Perfect intro.
Jesus.
So
why do we need Chat GPT if we got Sean?
So a policy institute in Oklahoma found that over 90% of voters would actually be affected by this and not be able to participate in the signature signature process, gathering process, which is insane. Now the law is being challenged. It's been heard by the state Supreme Court back in November. I don't think they've ruled on it yet. But we'll see.
Here's the main thing that everybody needs to get about this, right? Is that the people who are in power, the people who have the power, the politicians who hold the seats that we vote for, that get elected, they do not like citizen democracy. They do not like when citizens, are not getting what they want from the legislature. So they take matters into their own hands and launch these initiatives and get these signatures, and they will do everything that they can to obstruct that forward progress, because they see it as a competition. They think that they're the ones that should be responsible for this and not these upstart, activists.
Right. And we've seen an increase in legislative interference with the citizen initiative process across the country. Missouri has continuously tried to do it, to raise the threshold to 60% of the vote to get something to pass. Florida was actually able to pass that. Yeah. And that's the reason why Florida doesn't have a nonpartisan primary system today, is
despite
because
despite a significant majority already said they wanted it.
57% of voters said they wanted this.
For it, right?
Right. So like those of you listening at home, like if you want to hear more about, details about the wonky reform and how much it's more complex, and frankly, they won't even cover, like, when do you ever hear CNN or MSNBC talk about these things that are like fundamental to our democracy? That's why we have IVN. So you go to IVN, check out what the news is, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, sign up for our newsletter. We get all the, these are the types of things that matter to us. We all have our own independent opinions. Sometimes, most of the time you'll probably disagree with me, but you'll probably agree with Kara more. Probably never going to agree with
I'm so much more
Ethan.
Reasonable and
Yeah.
No independents are going to agree with me. So.
No. You have too much connections to New York Times. That's what it is.
Fake news over there, Ethan, cited by the New York Times.
Okay, speaking of things that we got to do before the end of the podcast here, we do have a video to show you all, and we want to get your raw, unfiltered reaction. Okay,
are you serious?
So let's just.
I hope this is like a PG or PG-13.
Well, we'll see. It might. It's definitely, it's R-rated or less.
R-rated or less.
Yeah, no, we are going, but me and Lena really.
It's not a Killer Tomatoes clip, is it?
Well, in a way, actually. It's closer than you might expect.
All
Yeah,
right.
so we're just gonna all watch the video together, and then so when you have something to say, just cut off the video and be like, I don't know about this. Just have a reaction to it. That's all. That's all it is. Just like if you were watching it with your friends. To be honest, I haven't seen the video either, so this could be a complete fail. That's the point.
Who has
we
seen
don't-
this video?
We don't vet anything that goes on this podcast.
No.
Very
No.
irresponsible
So
podcast.
this was posted to the official White House account.
You can't conceive of what I'm capable of!
Finishing this fight.
Yeah, I'm thinking on back.
I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
I am the danger.
Time to find out.
Maximum effort.
Here it comes. Now end this!
Flawless victory.
I don't even
I'm
know.
a little
But
surprised
I'm
there's a
thinking about
Yu-Gi-Oh
how did they
clip
get all
at
the
the
clip
end.
rights for that.
Well, exactly. I don't think that they did. There's no way they have the clip rights for that.
So it looks like they're
just-
basically splicing images from real footage of United States military strikes that are
And
going
in,
on right
in terms
now
of the rights,
with
I think they
footage from
spliced. Yeah,
superhero movies and video games and Braveheart
It's war
and Gladiator.
propaganda, right?
right. It's war propaganda, and I think they
It's
probably
not the first time anybody's ever done war propaganda.
they probably kept those clips just short enough to evade any
Yes,
type of because they
exactly.
have gotten in trouble with people who have said stop using our clips for your stuff. So,
That one has
Oh.
63 million views. That's
That's
a lot
nuts.
of views.
I forget what you think about it. You got to give them credit. They're creative. They're a very good, talented. They're
They've got some creative
talented,
people on there.
creative
I
team.
just, personally, I think it's a little bit tasteless. I think, that's legitimate. We're taking a real military action that's causing legitimate, turmoil all around the world. There's people dying in there. We probably just watched someone die in one of those clips. At least one person, right? So to me, I just think it totally. I watched Transformers as a kid. Now I'm watching, clips of people dying next to Transformers. Like that sucks. Like
Yeah.
that's
No, I agree. I mean,
Flawless victory from
Yeah,
like
like,
Mortal
come on, man.
Kombat.
to be
You're
fair,
ruining it.
to be
You're
fair,
ruining
it
it.
didn't start with Trump, but they've taken it to a whole new level. They have taken it like that's the white. That's not like his own account. That's not a thing. Like that's the White House's account, right?
Yes.
Where yes, it's Donald Trump's White House, but
that.
the White House is the people's house.
Yeah, and
right?
let's not even go. Think about what that says to other countries. First of all, people in other, first of all, they're
Well, Trump
already
would say it
subjected
says
to
that
a-
other countries don't mess with us.
Right, but that doesn't actually lead to other countries, at least, we could get into a whole debate about that, but other countries, we want other countries to mess with us. We want other countries to want to be part of our system. They're subjected to our media, our entertainment all the time, right? Half of our movies that we make are for China, for other countries.
And now they
I
get
just
our
think-
war hype videos.
well, now
Yeah,
it's,
now
well,
they're-
it's
they're
just
watching all-
it's just an
Exactly.
excuse for them not to take us seriously or the White House seriously, and quite frankly, I think government should take us seriously, but I
Well, I think Venezuela and Iran are taking us seriously, but that's
we'll
just
see.
one man's opinion.
We'll see.
Yeah.
They did it. They did put in place the former Supreme Leader's son, who apparently is a bigger hardliner than he is. So we'll see.
And we just killed his wife. So
He killed his
that's
wife,
great.
and I
Which is
think his
not cool.
daughter, like some other. And then the
School children.
I keep thinking about the school bomb. Yeah,
No,
this
no,
guy,
that's
yeah.
horrible.
Yeah,
That's
the
horrible.
investigation just came out this morning.
Oh, yeah?
It was the investigation found it was the U.S.
Because we're the only ones who have
Unfortunately.
Tomahawk missiles, and it was a Tomahawk missile.
yeah.
Yeah, so if you're following, you're listening to this show, make sure you hit the subscribe button, follow us on YouTube, subscribe on Spotify, and come to IVN.us. We got a lot of stuff going on, a redevelopment. Sign up for the newsletter. You'll be the first to know as we launch these features. You'll be the first to know when we have a new poll that's now being cited and tracked by the New York Times. And join us. And if, you feel like you have an extra check laying around you haven't filled out in a while, do that too. You can send it to us. But hopefully we'll see you next time. Like I said, stay in touch. Engage in the comments.
Yeah. Talk to us.
Email us.
Yeah.
And you know what? If you don't like an article that Kara wrote or Sean wrote or I wrote or Ethan wrote or anybody else in IVN, submit your own. right? We publish stuff all the time. We don't have a litmus test for your perspective. That's what we appreciate. That's what we love about IVN. We're all allowed to have our opinions. We don't say we're unbiased. We say we have biases that span the political spectrum. So stay in touch, subscribe, and join us again next time on Independent Voter Podcast. This is the Independent Voter Podcast, sponsored by the Independent Voter Project and produced by OLAS Media. Remember, you can always find the Independent Voter Podcast or the How It Really Works series at ivn.us. Follow and subscribe at olasmedia.com.
OLAS Media.